Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Fletcher. I'm an Assistant Director of Academic Affairs here at LSU, also on our Student Support Summit Planning Committee. I'd like to welcome you to our last concurrent session of the day. Today, we're going to have a discussion entitled Reclaiming the Analog, Making Room for New Old Habits in an Age of Distraction. Look forward to a very engaging and enlightening presentation by Kathleen Crosby. If you all have any questions, please feel free to use the chat. We'll save some time at the end for questions and answers, but there will be some opportunities to engage during the presentation. If you have any needs, please feel free to send me a private message through the chat, and I can get those addressed for you. As all of our sessions have been, this session is being recorded. So if we have any issues, it's being recorded and transcribed. So you'll be able to go back and get and view the recording and get any notes that you may need. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Kathleen and we can get our presentation started.
Okay, Ventric, thanks so much. Thank you everyone for joining me this afternoon on a Friday in a very busy spring semester. And I'm glad to see some of you who I know as well. Wendy, this might be a hard challenge for you, considering you're sitting in the stands, but for anyone who's like sitting at their desk or somewhere that they might have some analog things around, I'm wondering if you could grab a piece of paper and maybe a pen or a pencil, because actually our first moment of engagement will be something sort of analog based. I'm going to share my screen, hopefully pull up that PowerPoint for us and get ready to sort of like talk this through. And as Ventric said, if anyone has any questions, thoughts, feel free to put them in chat and the like. My presentation is called Reclaiming the Analog, Making Room for New and Old Habits in an Age of Distraction. It's a question I've been thinking about, obviously, since COVID, where we've seen lots of changes in terms of our students, in terms of concentration, in terms of we have lots of national sort of panic about reading and writing and changing in terms of learning and teaching. And I was kind of curious about how distraction is kind of taking place as we move to 2026 and what that looks like. So that's what I've brought for us to bear. I bring this topic to us both from my background in academic support, but also my background as an educator. I began my career as a high school English teacher, earned my master's degree in secondary ed and then in English, and then wound up in a PhD program down at UNC where I earned my PhD in English. So I've spent lots of time in classrooms and thinking about classrooms. But I equally work in the academic support space as a learning specialist at UNC Chapel Hill. And so I've been thinking about it both within the classes I teach as well as the students I work with, and that kind of third space that we all engage in when we talk about supporting our students. And so as we think through that, this is Sorry, y'all, I'm trying to advance my slide. The piece of paper and the pen becomes the first thing I'm going to ask you to do. And maybe we could take about like 3 minutes max. And I don't know if we're going to be able to share them in any way. Maybe we can get some pictures in chat. But what I'd love for you to do is basically draw for us. What does your academic slash workspace look like? And maybe for those of us who don't have a pencil or paper around, just grabbing the Notes app on your phone and kind of jotting it down for you would be fine. And by your academic workspace, I mean either just like what's on your laptop right now, or just like what's around your office. And we'll just take, it's 4:34 on my phone, so maybe I'll take till about like 4:36. I probably can't go without speaking for longer than that. So draw me a picture of what your academic working space might look like. Boop, boop. Sorry, y'all. We're in the 4:35 minutes, so um, hopefully you've had a chance to perhaps take pen to paper and see what this looks like. And if not, if you're sort of like, I am just ready for a Friday to end, if you're just sort of like thinking or looking about your room, that would be cool as well. I'm at 4:36, so I don't know. It's kind of impossible maybe for us to sort of share these. It probably could be possible to sort of open a video and sort of show. But if anyone either wants to talk in chat or speak out loud and unmute and just sort of tell us what your desktop looks like, whether that's your literal laptop or a desk you might be sitting at or the stand you find yourself in. And I'll give us. Whoops, Sonia, sorry, I keep like scrolling my screen. I see you unmuted. I don't know if you did that by accident or feel free to share.
Hi, Kathleen. I was just going to share that my desk looks like a hot mess.
Yeah, what's on it? What's on it, Sonia? Give us the Friday afternoon as we inch
So
towards the end of the semester.
I have an L, and
Hmm.
the front of my L is where my laptop sits, and then I have a screen in the corner, another screen in the corner, and then the rest of it is a mess because we have a couple workshops next week, and everything looks like it's on my desk.
Okay. Completely, like, yes, completely understand in terms of thanks, Sonia, so much for sharing. Uh, Feel free, anyone else, to sort of put in chat or tell us out loud. Ah, Laura threw something, a message in for us. Some post-its, some legal pads, a keyboard, a frog figurine, some pens and pencils. Apparently all organized, Laura, because it's nicely listed as well. Wendy, laptop monitor, extra laptop students can use. That's great because mine never works. The one in the corner, pile of papers that I'll get to. Usually things live behind and fidget toys. Absolutely. In terms of it, thanks for that, Wendy, as well. And I'll wait another couple of seconds just to see if there's anything else. Oh, Wilbur, thank you. Lots of post-it and spare papers. It's still nice to write things physically sometime. I hope you have a good collection of pens too, Wilbur. It sounds like you might. I'll kind of hold and we'll see if I get another sort of chat in the way or if anyone unmutes. But the reason I wanted to start with that activity, it's twofold. One I'll circle back to later. But I think in so many ways, we live and we work in the midst of so many things. The ideas of what's going on in our heads, the paper and the material culture we sort of have around us, the notifications and the cell phone messages, as well as the shopping notifications that might come up. And I think that we exist in the same space that our students do in so many ways as we sort of navigate that. And so in thinking about that, here comes the description I had sort of hoped for. What I hope to talk about today was the space we all live in, the fact that Instagram notifies us, we get a FaceTime call, we have multiple open windows. I closed mine all before this. We've got YouTube streaming in the background, and if you are like my students or your students are like mine, they have a billion untitled Google Docs, Google Docs -24 when they go to download it. Maybe we don't even see now necessarily the ways in which our students are distracted with their meta glasses that we can't quite tell is pumping music into them and letting them see messages as well. I iPhones, Apple Watches, and the like, and all the way down to live 360, where perhaps someone is monitoring you all the time. So I would argue that we and our students all live in a world of perpetual information, access, and distraction. And so how do we learn? And how do we get through our work days when we have all of this nonstop connection? And so particularly for our space, I'm thinking about the ways in which we can deliver tutor trainings that might encourage our tutors to first think through the use of the analog and the use of technical to support students, as well as what we can do in our own work with students to support them as well. So what I thought I'd talk through today is like, hey, how do we think about learning in the 21st century? But let me talk a little bit too about distraction. Like, is this new, what we're experiencing? And then what are some ways we can maybe take away? And while I certainly have like a handful of them, I hope that those of you on the call can also share yours and help us learn from each other. So, sorry, y'all, my math tends to. There we go. I wanted to start with this framework, and it was a study by Havlati et al. In 2025, which actually looked at a group of first-year writing students. And basically, it was a group of researchers who wanted to think about the beginnings of perhaps how AI and other technical forces were coming into play with student writing. And instead, what they began to see was that when students were writing, whether they were in class, whether they were in office hours or the like, they saw the students in front of them toggling between their course management systems, Google Scholars, while they also had YouTube or online chess open, and they were tons of using things. And what we found overwhelmingly so was that students find themselves in a fragmented world where there are social media, push alerts, tempting tabs, and the like. And what these researchers found, instead of thinking about, hey, how is AI affecting the writing process? More so, how is distraction affecting the writing process and the work process overall? And they term the term sort of a horizontal digital ecosystem, that if you look across like the tab of your computer, we have tab after tab after tab after tab. We exist sort of horizontally, and our attention is being pulled in all of these different directions. So you might think like, wow, my students seem like really different and they seem pulled in 12 different directions, and I can't get them to sit down and like complete the assignment within a certain period of time. But I offer you this example from a scholarship in 2003, which talks about a psychology professor and how they sit down to write for a publication. So the psychology professor sits down to write. You see, she's writing at home, and while she's doing that, she's actually doing the family laundry. So she sets the buzzer on the dryer, and every 45 minutes, it basically buzzes. And she's pulled away from her writing assignment to go downstairs and take care of her laundry. And while she's doing the laundry, the folding, the sorting, and the like, she finds herself sort of like her mind wandering. And in the way we all, when we step away from something, sometimes we see new ways we want to do it. So she begins to recall things she wanted to do with the text. She starts to think of new questions or ideas. She starts to think of things she hadn't been thinking about when she was sitting in front of the computer screen. And her break from this task, the task of writing her article, these moments of distraction she's taken, have actually become a really productive part of her process. And so actually we would say like, yeah, that probably works for me. I might be working on a report for my supervisor, step away to take a break or talk to a colleague. And suddenly when I come back, maybe I have a new idea of how to phrase it. And so perhaps we should think about the ways in which our students' multiple ways in which their attention becomes fragmented isn't really that different from us. And instead, perhaps it's a way for us to talk through how we manage our multiple pulls on our attention alongside our students. So I wanted to take for a moment or two to talk about like how this might apply to our academic workspace in the year 2026 and what attention and distraction might look like. So I've put the term here and thinking about tutoring as that is probably the academic space that many of us are in. The quote I want to talk through, or at least bring our attention to, is one about teaching. But I would argue that sometimes our work at tutoring, actually, we were having a conversation right before this, we started, is that our work is very much aligned with classroom work. But when we teach, when we tutor, we're asking our students to kind of notice what's important and remarkable in what they are looking at. So teaching's essential task consists in heightening the ability to notice what we are looking remarkable, important, and what we are looking at. So attention is about noticing and seeing. And if we take that as our first premise, we want to also think about the fact that attention is something that is limited. We don't hold our attention for like 24/7. It's like neurologically impossible. And so as we work with our students, we need to think of ourselves in a space where that we're also stewards of our students' limited stores of attention, that we want to think through ways in which to build the practice of attention and perhaps to the practice of distraction. Attention gets limited easily. We lose attention when we're bored. We lose attention and walk away from work when it's just too much intellectually for us to do. And we also get bored and want to walk away when it's continued attention. And so our challenge is to create sort of spaces for us students to do that. So before I think through the ways in which we can offer ways to think through attention in new ways, I want to raise the question of, is our attention actually different now? You might say with that iPhone, with that iPad, with any sort of notification in the world, we definitely are pulled in attention in different ways, right? But James Lang has also talked about distraction and actually turns back to history to say, well, not exactly. If we actually turn back to moments of new technologies in other time periods, that the mind has always been distracted. There's always been some object that is called attention away. And we see it back in the ancient Greek philosophers. We see it in the 19th century. We see it all over the place. So, for example, Aristotle, way back in ancient Greek, is saying that people who are passionately devoted to the flute are unable to pay attention if they hear someone playing a flute because they enjoy flute playing so much that it will take them away from the activity that presently occupies them. So, hey, Aristotle's commenting about flute playing. Well, I'm thinking about those notifications coming across my student's screen. Isaac Watts talking about 19th century and the new technologies that come about in the Industrial Revolution says the following: a variety of objects which strike the eye or the ear, especially when they're in motion or often changing, have a natural and powerful tendency to steal away the mind too often from its steady pursuit of any subject which we contemplate, and thereby the soul gets a habit of trifling and wandering. So if you feel sometimes that your attention becomes distracted, if you see it in your students, please know it is a human condition. And while there are certain things that might be new to our lives and our experiences and what pulls us away, it's always been there. And so it's a matter of us thinking through what we do in those spaces. But sorry, y'all. Sometimes my screen stays too. Sorry, sorry. I'm gonna reshare y'all. If I stay too long on a screen, I'm sure you've had this experience as well, that sometimes it freaks out and doesn't move. Anyway, we also know that time is related to attention, though. There's been many studies, beginning one often quoted is Gao et al. In 2014. We saw a lot of this during COVID, is the idea that our attention is related to time. The shorter something is, the more likely we are to pay attention. When we talked about this in COVID, we talked about the ways in which professors who perhaps were using a 40-minute or longer video in terms of course material was actually watched by a lower percent of students than if someone was showing a approximately 3-minute video. And so we know that our attention is definitely time bound. And so I think I want us to think about the fact that maybe distraction and sort of not paying attention is actually the norm. So we actually need to think about paying attention as an achievement and something to be fostered, something that I'm able to do, but I actually need multiple steps to ensure that I wind up focusing on what I need to and not sort of be pulled off track. And so if you're like, boy, my students can't pay attention any longer, don't necessarily think of it as a negative, although it might have impacts you're seeing that way, but actually that it's incredibly normal to be distracted. And so the other thing I want us to maybe throw into this thought about like distraction and the things that distract us is that whenever we're doing work, just like the examples we had at the beginning from Wendy and Wilbur and Laura and Sonia, is that we're always distracted because we're never fully engaged in work. Our brains are thinking somewhere else. Our bodies might be tired or achy, or we might be feeling the pain from a workout. We might be in a space that's really conducive for us working, or maybe we're in a space that doesn't make us want to work at all. And actually, there's always a phone, a tool, a pen, a something around us. So there's always something potentially to distract us or keep us from this like intense focus that we sort of desire. We always write within the body, within the space, and with certain tools. So y'all, I have a video I'm going to attempt to play. If not, I'll throw it in chat. And I'm kind of curious about this because in December, there was a big sort of viral push on TikTok about analog culture. So I don't know if you've seen any of these videos. I'm going to play it first and then talk about the smartphones. Let's see. And please, if the sound doesn't share automatically, do let me know and I'll unshare and do it again. Let's see if this opens. It does. Let's see if it plays. It is not sounding. Hold on. I'm on TikTok. And I might have to send.
If you unmute in the top left, there's
Is that where
a
it is? I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it. Top left.
in the top left of the video, there's like a
Oh,
set.
perfect.
Yeah.
Laura, thanks for saving me. I'm like, I know there's a secret and I'm missing it. I'm like, where? All my tech. Let me pull it back. Laura, thank you so much. And let's see if that solves it.
Right now online. And the word that's becoming synonymous with this non-digital renaissance is analog. Now, some people are predicting a mass exodus from our phones, but I'm more skeptical, and tech companies are savvy. So I see them adapting to this behavioral shift in new ways and challenging the anti-social media that Meta and whatever this is appear to be embracing. My sense is the next wave of social media-esque apps to emerge and thrive will zero in on your 5 to 9 and aim to facilitate in-person connection. The late-stage signals are all there, like TikToks about chaining your phone to the wall or printing out your Instagram feed, ChatGPT's recent no-phone party in LA, the concept of the analog bag, popularized by influencer Cease Campbell, cozy coloring talk, and even the surge in things like Louise Carmen notebooks that are almost $200 USD. And new apps are emerging, like Rodeo from former Hinge COO, that claims to wrangle your non-work calendar, or Albo that helps you actually do the things you save online. To me, these clearly fall into that 5 to 9 category that apps like Partiful, which says life isn't about being connected, it's about being in the same room, have already tapped into. I'm going to leave you off with a quote that bent my mind into a pretzel in the best way. 15 years ago, the internet was an escape from the real world. Now, the real world is an escape from the internet. It encapsulates this current feeling perfectly, that online life has become overwhelming and we desperately want to figure out how to step away from the screens. But we're addicted and we need help. So yes, in 2026, we will probably be doing more painting and knitting and journaling and dinner partying and smelling actual roses. But my guess is we'll also be planning and mapping and documenting it online. Offline activities and hobbies are picking up.
Anyway, as I look to go back to our PowerPoint, there has been a big response in terms of digital culture, both in terms of these analog bags, hobbies, and the like, the proliferation across Instagram of everything you're doing or packing in that bag. But there's also been a response in terms of both the elementary, middle, and high school level, beginning in fall of 2025, when there are a number of, and I forget, sorry, y'all, in the moment, the number of states across the nation that actually declared no smartphones in classrooms. Not that that would be an individual teacher policy, but actually a school-based policy. And as a result, we're looking at now the ways in which that has affected student learning and the like in terms of it. So I guess questions for consideration before I talk through some of the things that we've done in terms of both our tutor training and perhaps some strategies for working with students is maybe for a moment, if we all sort of wanted to share, is the digital affecting your sessions, your students, and or their learning? Do you feel, or are there ways you have integrated the analog and the digital in tutorial, academic support sessions, and in tutor training? How might you cultivate this attention if distraction is the default, or curiosity in sessions and tutor training? And in what ways can we encourage analog-based activities and academic support sessions? I thought I'd kind of put it mid-space in case it might be a good sort of break for us to kind of think through. But if anyone wants to kind of share some thoughts or answers, we can take a couple of moments to do so. Or we can leave these as pondering questions to sort of turn back to. I'm doing like the required-ish sort of minute of pause, just in case there's anyone who wants to share about how they're feeling digitally or sort of technologically in terms of space. But we can talk through some things as well and maybe return to these slides for us. Ooh, you all, I think I like pulled out. A couple of wrong slides in here. So I thought I'd take some time and talk through some strategies that are effective in terms of cultivating attention and using the analog within both tutorial sessions as well as student sessions. And so like number one, hold on, y'all. I'll pull it back here. Tutor training, how can you sort of cultivate attention and curiosity as well as model best practices? And I think for me, some of the central questions to think about first is like, hey, what are some practices and activities you can integrate into tutor training programming that models best practices for those sessions for your tutors? To think through, depending on how you deliver your tutor training, what can be done in terms of digital space and how that can be delivered, but also what can you have them do analog style, whether they're in digital or in person. And also a way to sort of think through attention and curiosity is to think about how could you embed moments to have our tutors think through and the like. And oh, perfect. I've got some suggestions from Laura in a moment we'll pull back to as well. And thanks, Emily, too. I'll do that when we get to our students. And so believe it or not, the opening like little activity I did with us is sort of a way to think about having an intro activity for your tutors or even potentially students that we have done in the past, a moment where we have paper like sitting on tables with some colored pencils for tutor training and actually have our tutors like draw their study / academic space and what it sort of looks like. It serves for us a couple of purposes, not necessarily just as an analog activity, but to open a discussion of like, hey, how do you learn best? What are the strategies you use to study? And when you meet your students for the first time, like having an opening conversation about how they learn best and what their learning space might be like can be a really effective like way to sort of break the ice within an academic session. Some of our tutors have directly transferred this kind of activity that we've done from tutor training into their sessions. We've also done it other ways as well. Sometimes we'll have those big white poster boards as you're entering the room where you can jot down whatever our question might be. Maybe it is, again, a question about how you study best, or like, what's the one thing you wish you knew about your discipline before you got into it? Or what's one thing you wish you knew about college ahead of time? And we love to use those kind of opening questions at the beginning and allow our tutors space to think through them and do it in a visual way, in an analog way, but maybe we weren't using the word analog way there, but something that builds sort of active learning and engagement. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want activities that I'm doing within tutor training to reside in my tutors' minds. So when they head off to their sessions, that they will like copy the same sort of ways and think about how can I create active learning spaces in there. I see Laura has an example as well, an intro, not necessarily an intro one, but something that Laura is doing in tutor training. Laura supervises tutors at Oregon State and has done active listening exercises in training where they take turn in pairs, listening to a story without responding and reacting, and then retell it to see how accurate they are. It too helps with resetting attention, probably helps a little bit with recall and just sort of seeing in terms of what learning looks like. And again, a great activity to do with tutors, but also one that's easily transferable for a tutor to use with students. How could they have students sort of like talk back or explain a concept to the other and listen and then retell that back? It's a perfect strategy both for tutor training as well as for student tutor learning. Sometimes you might find yourself in a digital space. Maybe you run digital trainings all the time, or maybe you want to mix up both analog and digital. So instead of sometimes using a whiteboard in your room or some sort of big paper screen, you can use a platform such as Padlet here. We did this as an opening training in terms of what we wish tutors knew when they had tutored in the fall as they started the spring semester. So this is from our spring 2026 tutoring in terms of what do they wish they knew. And I'm sure there's some cool takeaways as you sort of look through. It's a screenshot of our Padlet in terms of it. But Padlets can easily be embedded on online training as well, and are really good communal spaces and good communal resources for people to sort of build on, and equally so for transition programmings, I would say. I think I can't remember who said it in the moment. But wait, it's on my screen. Wendy. Wendy talked about how on her desk she has some fidget toys. And I would argue that fidget toys, or what I've sort of termed for the moment, attention artifacts, are great integration, both in terms of your tutor training as well as perhaps in your own space where you're working with students. Putting down some pipe cleaner, some origami paper, some fidget tools, some pens, some paper, some paper clips, whatever it might be, we found is really great in terms of like a tutor training that might be of length. Ours goes for 3 hours at night. And so it can be a really long time to go through lots of materials. So having things on hand that people can use in an analog way, whether it's just twisting that pipe cleaner or building flowers out of it, whether it is making a butterfly, a heart, or just folding a paper back and forth, has been really good in terms of like just the ways in which we take in information and need sort of moments of distraction while we're playing for attention. And as I talk about this as a mechanism within tutor training as well, it is certainly something that we might have in our offices as well. I know many of us have stacks of fidget toys, we've got pens around and the like, but thinking of tangible, tactile things that you can have in the space can definitely help in terms of thinking through how to cultivate attention in the midst of it. Boom. Sorry, y'all. As you move towards thinking about like content delivery and application, also thinking about connecting attention can be important. Again, I'm talking in the tutor training space, but I'm also thinking of a generation of tutors who are also in a space of video, short form, and the like in which they deliver information. So I tend to think through themes that can connect, and I can build out material that can kind of work. So this past fall, this is our fall 2025 tutoring, I maybe did this theme for two reasons. Last summer, all over Netflix was, of course, The Summer I Turned Pretty. And actually at UNC Chapel Hill, they had filmed certain scenes. So it seemed like an appropriate way for us to like build out a tutor training that kind of like worked within the setting of the campus, but also talked into larger cultural like things that were going on. So we used images from across campus, including ones that had been used in the film. And what we did was we built a ton of scenarios out with characters from various Netflix series, not just The Summer I Turned Pretty, But instead, we might have had some Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders who maybe thought themselves a little too professional and were having trouble believing in why that particular like class would be of value for them when they already had like a professional career. And so we tried to work through scenarios that worked with our student populations by recasting them within frameworks of pop culture. It worked for our tutors, and our tutors said at the end that we really got who they were because they found it super engaging to work with things or connect through things that they already knew. So what I would encourage you to think through is like absolutely like themes and methods to make that early training where you're going through the basics, perhaps that you yourself feel you've talked through a lot, and think about ways in which that audience is new and the ways in which you can connect. Emily has offered us some group activities as well, a little bit for her students in her lecture, but paper handouts, activities, group discussions, all those active learning strategies can absolutely work in group activities. Laura, when Laura spoke about the active learning strategy, again, we're talking about a way in which we have our tutors role playing, in which we have them doing activities, in which we have them doing it both in groups and individually. And that can definitely build a way to like capture attention and hopefully provide mechanisms, strategies, takeaways that our tutors can then transfer into the spaces that they find themselves during the year with our students. And sorry, y'all, too long on a slide and my freezes. Up and back. I'm thinking about, and we've talked a little bit about this already, but this has pure applications to student academic sessions as well, that you certainly can build ways in which activities can introduce or become ways to build connection early on in tutoring sessions. How can you kind of build community and the like? What can we have them draw, discuss, etc.? What we can also think about is, hey, what attention artifacts can we maybe have in our own spaces to think through, and what ways we can use active learning. The pen, the paper, the whiteboard, the doodle note taking on the paper is also ways to think about building active spaces for our students. And I'm also thinking about the ways in which we can provide space for our students to sort of practice what classrooms have sort of moved to. There's documentation that lots of teachers, professors, and the like, and I mean at the high school level as well as into college, are moving, particularly in the humanities, back to sort of paper-based assignments, whether it's a test, whether it's an essay. They're being written in class much more than they have in the past, or blue books are the norm. And so if our job is to work to support the academic spaces our students find in main campus, then thinking about ways in which we can have students write by hand, free write by hand, do something that might be analogous to a blue book or so, if you will. It's one thing when we talk all the time, and I always feel bad doing a training because I wind up talking all the time. But classrooms aren't about talking all the time, and assessments aren't about talking all the time. So what way can we find the spaces where if there's a movement to writing by hand, if there's a movement to doing things more in class, if there's something more about personal reflections and personal connections, then how can I think about incorporating that into my like academic sessions, and how can I think about talking about that with my students as well? I have one last thing that I just kind of wanted to offer because it's something I'm randomly doing in a class that I'm teaching. But I'm thinking about the ways it can relate to academic support spaces as third spaces on campus. So I wanted to talk briefly. I'm going to talk about a project I'm doing with a first year writing class, but I also want to talk about the ways in which it might work in our sessions. So I'm actually having my students engage in this analog practice. I'm like, wow, I'm talking about it like just sort of theoretically and with tutor training, but like how does it work with students? And so in a project that's called Living the Digital and Reclaiming the Analog, I've actually asked my students to choose or identify an analog practice and do it over a period of 3 weeks for 6 times. They can choose anything in the world that they want. As you can tell on the left, there's an image of one of my students who's doing needlepoint, which has like gone viral and blasted across certain areas of our country, and definitely TikTok and Instagram. Another one talking about painting. I have another one who's writing letters to their mother. I have a student, it's a PWI at which I teach, as is UNC, and who is a student of color and feels that he stands out overwhelmingly and is sort of questioning whether he should be at a PWI or an HBCU. And so his sort of analog activity is to go to university events and see if there are other ways to sort of fit in, rather than just by like the marker that his body is. And so as my students are doing this, they're writing field notes and the like, and they're really finding things that sort of interest them and maybe things they don't want to do as well. But I'm wondering in terms of like us as third spaces, whether we're in libraries, academic supports, our own building and the like, are there ways in which we're letting students sort of be who they are, whether it's through art, through music, and sort of encouraging their analog hobbies and their wellness and their mental health by sort of like allowing them to put down their phones in other ways besides our sort of like, don't have your phone out while you're doing schoolwork or pull those notifications off. But is there a space to have like a reading group? Is there a space to do something sort of artsy? Is there something that we can do in transition programming or the like that might encourage the sort of building of student identity beyond the academic, and something that might sort of like allow them to pick up a practice, analog or otherwise, that might help them like figure out what they do or what they sort of put down, if you will. The musicians and the artists and the like are amongst us as our students, be they just students and student athletes. We all sort of have that need to sort of express ourselves. Y'all, that's all I think I have for the most part to sort of take us through and say, oh gosh, I like unshared and I had my references. Hold on. But I do have for you a series of pulling it back up interest references that I sort of used and thought through and took up. And I realized that I spent a lot of time sort of like theorizing, talking through, and then offered a simple solution for us in terms of things that I know that I've done and things I've sort of thought about. But I'd love to hear from you if there's anything that you have done or found effective in terms of attention, distraction, something you're struggling with, or the like. Or if you have any questions for any of us in the room, we'd love to hear them. So I'll unshare and sort of open that up. If that makes sense, Ventrick, I think I did that.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. We have a few minutes available for questions. If anyone has anything, feel free to utilize the chat feature, or you can take yourself off mute and ask your question of Dr. Crosby.
Thanks, Sonia. Thank you all for joining me. I know, I'm sure, as you all are feeling the end of spring, a late Friday afternoon, but this LSU Student Summit is always such a great moment to meet other people and hear and talk. And it's perfectly understandable too if anyone has any questions or thoughts they want to share.
I have a question. Kathleen, I know you mentioned it in response with the tutors, and I had a student emergency come up, so I'm gonna miss some of it if you mentioned it. How receptive have students been to kind of moving away from some of the digital?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, I've seen it in two ways, right? And Vendrick and I were talking about this, and I was thinking about it last night when I was like, ooh, in what way should I talk about like AI and the like, and does this get added onto this? I found like I have a number of students who, and I've noted it this semester overall, that actually want to start to draft on paper. Um, for whatever reason. I don't know if it's a marker of what these are first year students overwhelmingly too, who I've seen it with, but who want to write things by hand, who want to sort of write before they head to the computer. And part of that, Wendy, might be also a product of they're sort of, some of them are less comfortable with the sort of, well, they're comfortable with technology. They're less comfortable with technology in terms of like academic spaces. And it might have been a matter of like pre-access, and it might have been a matter of just sort of accessibility or what their school sort of had. But I've seen a movement to like this sort of like thinking and sort of marking up online. I observed a tutor the other night who someone was doing, they had to read an academic journal article, and this might not be about writing. And they were like, wait, what if we put this on AI? We'd save ourselves so much time or the like. And I watched the tutor go, well, hey, let's just pull the abstract into a Google Doc. And why don't we try to like translate it like line by line, even just like a couple of bulleted notes to sort of see. And I thought it was a really nice way to sort of deal with the sort of automatic wanting to turn to the technology that will help, if you will. And so I think if it's done like with support and with like purpose, and also a way, either I've seen whether it's student initiative or this sort of like, hey, I know and I recognize there are spaces that it can help in, but let's see if it works, and let's see if it'll like which one might benefit from it. Because I think sometimes there's this like learning space of it. The other thing I know too, just in terms of maybe not like writing like on paper necessarily, but like a whiteboard or a big piece of like, I have big calendar paper. So when I turn it over, like that, like anything that becomes sort of like big paper wise, they like. And I've also had a couple of tutors mention to me this term that they have been not necessarily related to training, but they've been requiring their students to like physically take notes on paper and pen. They just say there's just something they want to see more with processing, that they're finding it harder to read and get through problems. This was a stats tutor was talking to me this week. So I feel like there's a little bit that's student driven and a little bit of like the adult in the room kind of encouragement that's kind of helping build that kind of space. And sometimes it's a matter of like, hey, in this class, you're going to have to write that essay in class. Like, how do we prep for that? And let's see if we can even do it, even for a short period of time. So sometimes small scale. Sorry, I yapped for a bit there, Wendy.
No, that was great. And as you were talking, though, I was thinking, I've noticed a lot of my students recently enjoy writing things on like a sticky note to stick on their computer. So it's like the physical to-do list, so they're not constantly going into the technology.
Right. And easy, yeah, and easier to rip up and say you're done too, right? Because the striking and that's there. But I feel like, yeah, I always have like little smaller pads around too, like not just big paper. So here, let's like outline this or like take some notes while you're watching that film or whatever you might have to do so you can do it. So I think those small moments can kind of like still encourage um, the critical thinking and reading that a lot of people are saying, like, whoa, we're losing this, and where's it gonna go, and how are we gonna get it back?
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Well, we really appreciate and enjoyed this presentation. You know, the just thinking about large scale distractions and just the need to really simplify life and kind of slow down a little bit. For me, it resonates both in what I do as a professional,
Mm.
but also outside of work, outside of parenthood, just the need to become less dependent on the digital in everyday life. I really appreciate it. As we prepare to close out, as you leave the session, you'll get a prompt to complete our concurrent session survey. Um, Please feel free to submit any feedback, things that went well, things that we could have done better. Um, that way, we can continue to provide the greatest resource and the greatest support possible for our not only our student athletes, but our presenters as well. But we appreciate each and every one of you for logging on with us today. Hope you have a wonderful weekend and a great rest of the semester.